Alrighty then, trainers. We've looked at the present simple and the continuous form, a lovely ing. We've looked at the past simple and irregular verbs, of course, and we've looked at the past continuous, our policeman's tense. Now, we're faced with a future. The English future forms are really quite interesting, and it's taken me a little while of training. Well, I've been training for many years now, but it took me a little while to find some creative and innovative ways to present the future forms. First, let's have a look, and we can see on the slide here the different types of future forms we have. So have a quick squizzy. And on this slide, which complements the previous one, we can see how and why we use these particular forms. Now, what we're looking at here, in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to going to. I am going to paint the door. Now let's have a look at how we use our present continuous form for a future meaning. I am painting the door on Monday. These two forms look rather similar, and we could consider them to be rather similar. And there's some discussion about when we use a going to form and when we use a continuous form. Before we start looking at why we use one and not the other, first I really want to make it clear how these two forms are built and what they look like, how we can identify them. So please have a nice quiet look at the following slides, which will illustrate differences and the intention of each form, and also make it clearer to spot when you see it in a book or in a text. Let's talk in just a moment. Officially, going to is for something which is planned or intended, but not yet fixed. And our continuous form is for something which is fixed, it's booked into our calendars, it's planned, it's confirmed. This is the difference between the two forms. There are many learners who find difficulty in seeing the difference between these two forms. And if we reflect on our own use of English, it could be that we interchange these two forms. So my particular advice, unless your students are undertaking a rather strict English exam, what I advise my students is that if in doubt, use the going to form. Personally, as a native speaker of English, I've got no difficulty understanding the intention of a speaker if they use going to. And if you think about it yourselves, would you have a problem? Do you ever consider the use of the present continuous form versus the going to form? And we have to be really honest here about the difference between what is regular everyday spoken English and what's required in an examination. And you can set your own priorities, of course, but from my point of view, if I understand a speaker and if they have non-impeding errors, why not use one form rather than the other? I think it's pretty clear. So I'd love your feedback on this point, of course, so you can use that discussion board. The other forms of future tense that we can see here on the slide are will. I know from experience that my German students tend to have learned will as the future form in English, and it's probably because it relates quite closely to the German verb werden. If you speak German or if you understand German, you'll know what I mean. But Germans use English grammar forms and time forms quite differently. So you might come across people who use will for everything that they intend, for something planned, for something confirmed, for a spontaneous decision, for a promise, or for a prediction. Here's the kicker. In English, when we consider this, we use will for those last 3 points I mentioned: a spontaneous decision, for a prediction, and for a promise. And up on the screen here, you'll see example sentences of those. So there is a large difference between will and going to, and will and the present continuous, but a very slight difference between going to and present continuous. There are other future forms which we have in the English language, and we'll focus on those particular ones in an upcoming lecture. But for now, in my opinion, it's critical to focus on these 3 points because these are the 3 we most commonly use. Now, how do we introduce these to our students? Fantastic. I'm so glad you asked. We'll cover that point in a future lecture. So what I've done for you now is I've prepared a couple more slides which demonstrate the differences between the main 3 future forms. The next lecture is going to look at how we can introduce those to our students. And the lecture after that will look at some other future forms which we may like to present to our students. So I hope this has been useful and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. Bye-bye.